It's a terrible thing that people have to die to spark a rebellion, Mike Brown and Eric Gardner. But this much is clear. They did not die in vain, because their deaths have definitely opened up what I think will be a global uprising, a new phase of an uprising not only against racism and the police, but against capitalism. The Occupy movement was one phase of that, but this is a higher phase. Essentially because it's against racism and the most dangerous, in-your-face, pernicious kind of racism and national oppression, and that is the state's war against young black and brown people. There's many levels to racism, institutional racism, but the realest one is when you get beaten up or killed. You're lucky if they just throw you into the prison industrial complex. Chances are you could get killed. Many of us have been going to these demonstrations for decades, 30 and 40 years, 50 years. Some are bigger than others. Some are somewhat more multinational than others. But I'll tell you something, as a veteran of hundreds of demonstrations in every part of this country, I have never seen the percentages of white faces marching against this police murder. And I keep turning around, and if Monica's next to me, I'll say, look at all these white folks. I mean, what's that about? I mean, clearly black and brown people are in leadership in Ferguson and elsewhere. But this is a new day, however you want to characterize it. I think it's the continuation of a global uprising against capitalism, but just much more revolutionary. I mean, what else can you call it? I was listening to the talking heads on MSNBC, I think it was last night, and they were trying to calculate from their reports from the different demonstrations, Boston, Chicago, Oakland, Los Angeles, Baltimore, the South, Las Vegas, how many people participated. And they were talking in terms of 250,000 people, at the very least, having come out in the streets, not once, but 3, 4, 5, 6 times, staying out in the streets all day from 6 to 12 hours, and not just having, we went to point A and then we stayed there, we made some noise and we left and went home. No, where is the nearest bridge? We are going to shut this bridge down. Where is the nearest tunnel? Where is the nearest big transportation hub that we can just disrupt? Where are they lighting some stupid Christmas tree and trying to have Christmas in the midst of all of this police terror? We are headed toward that. It wasn't only Rockefeller Center. And by the way, when we meet tomorrow on some of this, we still got Rockefeller Center in our mind, because a lot of tourists go there, and no one should feel that they could take a vacation from this and go see some tree, and we'll do our best. It's Occupy, but 100 times better, because it's got black and brown leadership, and it's made the cutting issue racism and police fascist racism as far as young people are concerned, whose lives are completely expendable. I want to make a point or two about labor. It may seem disconnected, the organized working class, but I've thought about it a lot. The day, it was yesterday, the day that big demonstrations around the country took place in reaction to Garner and Brown. It was also a national strike of fast food workers. From what I've heard, it was pretty successful in terms of the numbers of workers who participated in it. You know, they're sort of going from symbolic numbers to actually whole stores, whole restaurants walking out. I think it got completely eclipsed by this ongoing uprising against the police. Now, maybe that was an unfortunate coincidence that no one could do anything about. You know, the workers in the union had planned this. They've been planning it. But the jury verdict, you know, in the Garner case came down, and that set off, you know, another round of these massive demonstrations. I don't think the leaders of the organized labor movement should let themselves off the hook. The fact of the matter is, although they are clearly separate, with separate issues, they are linked. They're also linked. You all know that. I don't have to go down all the ways that they're linked. And if the top echelons of the labor movement weren't so conservative and narrow-minded and bureaucratic and stuck in old ways of organizing that are not revolutionary, but the antithesis of being revolutionary, then there would be a relationship, comrades and friends. There'd be a relationship between this movement of primarily young, not only, but primarily young people who are rising up against racist police terror, and those who are organizing low-wage workers. There'd be a vertical integration political relationship, but that's not the way the labor movement is organized. It's hierarchical, it's narrow, it's conservative, and this was a symptom of that problem. Actually, the same thing took place a week ago. All of the forces who are organizing around, you know, the Walmart workers, and that's, you know, that's incredibly important. Low-wage workers, no union, no benefits, the largest civilian employer in the country, you know, in the world, you know. They target the day after, you know, Thanksgiving, we call it day of mourning, Black Friday, as a day that they try to organize their workers and have job actions and also rally their supporters. And they did that. And I'm pretty sure that it was pretty successful because they put a lot of resources into it. And you know, our Walmart, you know, supported by a number of unions, is pretty substantial. But the same thing happened. It should come as no surprise after the grand jury Brown verdict that these militants in the street, they would also target Black Friday and say, let's shut down Macy's, let's shut down some shopping areas, you know, to remind these owners of these stores that, no, that the cash register is not going to ring, business will not go on as usual, you will not be able to make money while we have this state of war declared against our Black and brown youth. And I think even then, on Black Friday, that the militant protests in response to the police somewhat overshadowed the Walmart thing. Maybe that couldn't be helped. But again, I don't think we should just let it go as an unfortunate coincidence. Why is there no relationship between those who are organizing to fight the police terror and those who are organizing millions of low-wage workers? What possible sense does that make? Why should it be seen and felt as if these struggles are not connected and exist in different universes? Actually, if you go to some of the demonstrations, on a local level, people were linking the issues. They definitely were. Rightfully so, instinctively so. They knew it. Hands up, you know, don't shop, 15 in a union. They were like trying all sorts of combinations to combine low-wage workers and hands up and I can't breathe, you know. But at that bureaucratic level, It wasn't there. What's the solution? These movements have to work together. Maybe if they work together, if there's a labor movement that's organized a little more vertically, where they not only make room for, but embrace, not try to control, these other mass militant movements dealing with these other vital social issues, maybe everybody will know what everybody's doing. Hello? And maybe they can say, well, you do this on this day, and we'll all be there. And then you do this around this issue on this day, and we'll all be there. And it won't seem like these issues and these struggles are not related and exist on different universes. We've got to cut that out. I mean, this is what the discussion in the labor movement is all about. How do we embrace the most oppressed? You know, we're thinking about writing a labor support statement that trade unionists can sign, you know, and I think, you know, the working title of it was Black Lives Matter to Labor, you know, and at some point in that statement, the point that should be turned around. If black lives, black young lives, people who are not in the union, people who haven't even been employed, may never be employed, you know, with the capitalist crisis. If these black lives are not important to labor, then why should labor be important to them? And the whole point is that everybody's got to see that at the end of the day, we're all in the same huge class, regardless whether you have a job, whether you're in a union, etc., etc., etc. Those are details. We are all in the same class. And we got to find ways to draw our class together, not on any basis, on the most revolutionary basis. That way, we will sink fear into the bourgeoisie, which is already very afraid. You know, the ruling class, I think, was taken by surprise by this. They're stunned by this. The same way they were stunned by Tahrir Square, by a lot of uprisings, to a certain extent by Occupy. They're stunned by this. And, you know, they're scrambling to, you know, make up, come up with some kind of, something that appeases people, you know, meeting all sorts of civil rights meetings, back and forth, Washington, so forth, you know, jet set leaders flying around. You know, another interesting thing about this movement is that, and it's so great because a lot of the leaders are young, they already are suspicious of, you know, the old guard progressive leaders, you know, because somehow they've already realized that whatever good these leaders want to do, most importantly, they want to usurp the militants, take it over and make it safe and push it back into the Democratic Party and keep it off the street, keep it out of Grand Central Station, keep it off the West Side Highway, you know, out of the Holland Tunnel, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, they already know this. And that is tremendous. You know, that shows that you know, they're way ahead of a lot of people. What can we do? We must embrace this struggle, comrades and friends. It's very important. It's important for our party to do it, even though one might say, well, you're small, so what can you do? Well, I'll tell you one thing. We have a lot of experience. We have hundreds of years of experience, and we still have revolutionary politics, which makes that experience all the more important and decisive. We're also multi-generational. You know, some of the comrades were laughing a few days ago. I don't know whether we can keep up, you know, marching for 6 hours, going on bridges, doing this and that. Maybe I'll march half the way and whatever. You know, we do what we can do. But there are other things that we can do. There are a million ways that any individual or any organization can find to support these revolutionaries, these young militants. And it's important that a multi-generational working class organization try to do this and orient others to do this. Because sometimes young militants look at older generations, and they see someone coming who is going to try to tell them not to do what they're doing. They see someone coming who may be coming to patronize them and pat them on their shoulder and say, but I got more experience, so you don't really have to do that. Let's get involved in this election campaign, or let's do this, or come inside and I got a meeting with Senator so-and-so and Congressman, and we're going to give you some money and blah, 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 blah. You know, this is what they see sometimes. But when they see people like us coming, people who represent 3, 4, 5, even 6 generations, and we're saying, how can we help the revolution? They say, wow, look at this, and it was good to see that more multi-generational people are taking part in this. And we're going to organize in the labor movement. Forget about the top leadership. We're going to organize amongst the rank and file to make sure that there's support for this rebellion. As Amani pointed out, the People's Power Assembly has provided some infrastructure, some support for all that's happened. We have not been alone. There are thousands of activists and dozens of organizations that have been doing this, locally and nationally. But we're doing the best that we can, and we're proud of what we've done, and we think it's made a difference. And we think that we have helped cement relations. And we think that we have been a positive force for trust. We're certainly not throwing cold water on people. We're saying, you want to do this? Let's figure out a way to do it. You need help, jail support? Let's figure out a way to do it. Tomorrow afternoon, after the demonstration around Akai Gurley, which I think is around 3, at 5 o'clock in this office, the PPA and also OcuEvolve and a few other groups, we're going to have a strategy session on what we can do moving forward through the Christmas holidays, through January, the Martin Luther King holidays, maybe even going into February, Black History Month. And we'll be considering things like, what can we do on December 13th? The people in Ferguson have put that out. The old guard liberals have called for a march on Washington. Okay, that's to put pressure on the federal government to do what? Listen, anybody who goes to a demonstration against this police terror is doing a progressive thing. But there's a contradiction, too. We also want to make sure that this militant movement that wants to stay in the street and shut things down, we want to make sure that it's not hurt by any initiative by some other folks up here with another agenda. So, like everything, it's a contradiction. Hopefully that demonstration will be very big, and hopefully people will provide money for buses. But there also can be local demonstrations. And we can once again go to Macy's and try to shut it down, or some other shopping center. So we're going to consider this. There's the Christmas holiday. Should there be Christmas with this war against youth? Can we go back to Rockefeller Center? There's a question of trying to organize a citywide shutdown around the Martin Luther King holiday. Maybe another march on Wall Street. These are some of the things that we're going to consider, and we're considering them, in tandem with forces around the country, and especially with forces in Ferguson. Everybody wants to focus on the federal government. Well, local government, local courts, local grand juries, they fail. Now it's the federal government. That happens. We've seen this picture before. But the fact of the matter, no matter what reforms they talk about, they're not going to do away with racist police terror as long as racist capitalism exists. We know this. We know this. We've learned this before. There has to be programmatic alternatives too. One of the things we're thinking about is maybe convening a tribunal against racist police terror and using that for 2 purposes. One, to have the victims come forth, to have activists and leaders maybe not only from around the country, but from around the world, come and, be the grand jury, for a people's tribunal, but also to have sessions that consider programmatic responses to this whole question of how do we stop this war being waged by racist police against black and brown people. But it all starts at this meeting tomorrow at 5, which you're all welcome to come to.
Okay, thank you, Larry. And
Wow, Carmen, as we're talking, as we're winding up the meeting, Tony was just showing me some of the things that she's getting on Twitter, which I don't get, and, what is that about at this point? But the first thing was that a whole bunch of protesters occupied the Apple Store on Fifth Avenue. Yeah. This was like a half an hour ago. Around this issue. And right now in Boston, it seems like thousands are blocking a highways. We're in the middle of something. We don't know, we don't know where it's going. We don't know what it'll feel like a week from now or a month from now, how the weather will affect it, and a million other questions. But we're in the middle of something. We're in the middle of something that has that's unexpected and has a life of its own and appears to have depth, perhaps, And it's a crisis for a section of the working class movement, which we are a part of. In one sense, we're very distinct politically as a genuinely revolutionary tendency. But in other ways, we're part of, the movement because we've been around for, 60 some odd years, and can't help be affected by all that, just as the world has been affected. Long period of reaction. And the older working class movement, before you put a label on it, social democratic, whatever, and all those labels apply, they don't expect this stuff. Long ago, they have sort of made their peace with capitalist stability. And they remember their revolutionary days, but that was back when. And now, they are what they are, they're single issue, whatever, they're well-meaning, what choice really do we have at the end of the day? Peter King or a Democrat, that's how they, but this is a huge crisis for them because they don't expect it. It goes against every instinct that they've been subjected to and that they've honed for an endless amount of time. They literally do not know what to do, except maybe instinctively to act conservatively to stop it, or at least in some contradictory way. So it's a crisis. I don't think we should feel overwhelmed because we're not in the leadership of it, and we shouldn't try to be. That doesn't mean we can't be in it. There's a lot that we can do. And there's a tremendous amount we can do to help if you want to do that. If you want to be in this and you want to help, if those two things qualify and you want to be with the militants, then it's just a matter of details and time. You can figure it out, If you're overwhelmed and you don't, well then, then you're still suffering, I think, from, several generations of reaction, which can have an effect on an organization. Look what it's done to the working class movement in the broader sense. So it's a crisis moment. All of a sudden, an upsurge bubbles up from below. Something that we had been arguing with each other over whether it was even possible. And all of a sudden it begins happening. We have just got, whatever happens in the next week or month or so, and of course we all want it to keep on going. Maybe it'll take a rest, maybe it'll pick up in the spring. Who knows? Who the hell knows? What we have just gotten evidence of is the depths of social potential explosion that just lie there, and all of a sudden, ba-boom, like a dam is broken, you see? It should be a reminder to the party. While we can't go around saying the revolution is next weekend, on the other hand, it's no longer, it's also no longer good enough to say nothing's going to happen until another lifetime.
Right.
It's time to get your head in the right place and not be overwhelmed and overtaken by events that you did not expect. Positive events. Because then you become, then we're alienated from it. What the hell? This is, our whole plan is all messed up. All of our meetings, all of our activities, all the things we've been planning for our personal lives, or whatever, because there's some uprising going on. But are we supposed to be about that? Wait a second, you know. Really, you know, it's time for the party to stop for a second, take a deep breath, and say, yeah. And we want to be we want to be as much of a factor in it as we can, and we can do that if we take stock of ourselves. Actually, we're more decisive now than I think each of us, and even collectively, we imagine. Who I really feel sorry for is some of the older movement, and not because of their age, by the way, because I'll tell you something. If you have a revolution in your mind and in your bones, and you don't think the whole thing is over, and that's not how you've been acting, you know, you could be any generation with any ailments, I'll tell you, at any number, and your revolutionary politics will make a difference. It'll be the difference between night and day. It'll be the difference between night and day. This party was founded by a handful of people in a period of reaction. And they stood out because of who they were politically. We're in much better shape. I feel sorry for all the revolutionaries and all the groups that were better and that are still around, but are in lots of ways dead wood. Because they've lost. They have become irrelevant. They don't know what to do. And, you know, 9 out of 10, the chances that when they finally do something, it won't be that good. And it'll be something that ends up supporting the conservative, moderate, restraining elements. They'll do it in the name of being progressive, but they'll do it with the others as against the militants. We are the antithesis of that. And there are a lot of jokers and ultra-leftists who you don't take and so forth. And I don't even know what the other groups are doing. I think they're stunned by it. I think they're so into themselves, and you know, so I think they're just surprised by it. You know? But we can be a factor in it. Other 2 points. I don't know if Heather's still here, but she made an important point because it's about the character of what happened. It's great to be for a $15 minimum wage, even to be for a union, very controversial, family fights, whatever. But I'll tell you, the cops, this is like the acid of the class struggle, you know. You could see, if it hasn't happened to you already, you could see the fights. You could see losing friends. This is, I mean, the superstructure of imperialist capitalist society invests so much into making the cops sacrosanct. The huge petty bourgeoisie, I'm talking about the real petty bourgeoisie, the shop owners, they depend on the cops. They're like this with them. Until the cops come in and break their head, which might happen once in a while, you know, if the bigger bourgeoisie orders them to do that. The cops have deep social support. They have, because of their role. And to be against them is pretty big. It's pretty big. Remember the arguments we were having a few years ago when, you know, Occupy was loopy and they thought they could appeal to the cops. Well, you know, fast forward a couple of years later and they're calling them pigs and, so, it's important. And finally, too, the communications revolution is not just a technical phenomenon. It is a political phenomenon. And it's playing a role in this. And the comrades who understand it, all comrades are precious. Some of us better understand, because it's a political thing. That's what things become in the evolution of capitalist society, and the revolutionizing and re-revolutionizing and re-revolutionizing of the means of production. The communications revolution is part of that. It's not just something. And somewhere it's played, if the people weren't ready, this would not happen. But somewhere the revolution in communications is playing a role that it could not have played at another time. So it's just so many issues, but let's not let go of this bone, Let's dig in, and it won't matter. It won't matter whether it seems to die off for a little while or whether it rages. We'll figure out the right thing to do to be with it. And maybe drag some other people from the older movement too. Wouldn't that be a good thing? Because they have some resources. And if we had to go down the list of things how you could help, short of being out in the street for 12 hours, we'd be here all night. But there's no end. There's no end to what an organization with our experience can do. No end to it. If we want it, and if we see things clearly, and if we have a political program.